On cold nights like this, when the world outside falls quiet and every sound inside your home feels a little too sharp, there's a reason your instincts suddenly sharpen. Because sometimes the danger you fear isn't lurking miles away. Sometimes it's close enough to hear your breathing, close enough to watch you through a crack in the curtains, close enough to reach out and touch you if it wanted to. Tonight's stories are not about distant mysteries or far-off legends. These are the terrifying, true accounts of people who came face to face with something or someone they were never meant to encounter. People who felt the warmth of a stranger's breath behind them, who saw shadows move where no one should be standing, who realized too late that they weren't alone. You're about to hear 3 chilling close encounter experiences that pushed ordinary people into moments of raw, primal fear. Before we begin, take a second to look around your own room. Check the corners, listen to the quiet. Fear feels different when you know the threat can get this close. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you love real scary stories, buckle in, because this one goes deep. Tonight we'll follow someone who discovered an intruder inches away from their bedroom. Dora Kemper, who found out the forest was watching them far too closely, and a late-night driver who realized they weren't as alone as they thought. These aren't just stories from the dark web or urban legends passed around online. These are true events experienced by real people, and every detail brings you right into the moment where safety disappears. So dim the lights, settle in, and get ready, because the closer the encounter, the harder it is to forget. It was close to midnight when Eric pulled into the small, dimly lit parking lot of the roadside motel. He'd been on the highway for more than 7 hours, driving through patches of mist, long stretches of forest, and endless empty turns. His eyes were burning, and the persistent drumming of the rain on the windshield felt like a warning telling him to stop. He didn't normally travel alone, and he definitely didn't normally choose rural backroads at night. But this time, he had no choice. His sister had fallen seriously ill, and the nearest hospital that specialized in her condition was 3 states away. He had to get there, but exhaustion had begun pulling at him in ways he couldn't ignore. If he stayed on the road any longer, he knew he'd become a danger to himself. So he stopped at the first place he could find. Rest Haven Lodge, the kind of motel where half the neon sign flickers and the other half is dead entirely. Inside, the office smelled faintly of cigarettes and something sour. An older man sat behind the counter, flipping through a hunting magazine. His eyes lingered too long on Eric when he walked in, and the man smiled in that slow, careful way that didn't reach his eyes. "Late night for traveling," the clerk said. "Yeah, just need a room for the night." The man slid a key across the counter. "Room 7, end of the hall. You'll be the only guest tonight." Storms kept everyone off the road. Eric didn't love the way he said that, but he nodded and headed to the room anyway. It wasn't worth overthinking. He just needed sleep. Room 7 was small and outdated, with floral curtains and old wood paneling. A single lamp cast a yellowish glow over the bed, making everything look older and more tired than he felt. But the sheets looked clean enough, and the door locked, so he didn't complain. Eric kicked off his shoes, fell onto the bed, and let his eyes close. But he didn't get long. Sometime after he drifted into the haze between waking and sleep, a sound snapped him back upright. Tap, tap, tap. Not loud, but sharp, deliberate. Eric sat completely still, listening. The room was silent for a moment. Then, tap, tap. This time, he recognized it. Someone tapping on the door, slowly, repeatedly. His chest tightened. He checked the clock to 13 a.m. "Hello?" he called, keeping his voice steady. No response. He waited, listening hard. After a full minute of silence, he exhaled shakily and let himself sink back into the bed. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was the storm or something falling outside. He lay down again, and then tap, tap, Tap. Faster now. More urgent? Eric bolted upright, heart pounding. Who's there? Silence. He walked carefully to the peephole, hesitated, then looked. Nobody. No shadows, no figures, nothing moving. He stepped back. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, deeply wrong. He checked the lock secure, the chain secure, the window latched. Another few minutes passed in silence, and he told himself to calm down, to get a grip. Maybe kids were messing around. Maybe the clerk came to check on him. He didn't know, but he couldn't stay terrified of every noise. He sat on the edge of the bed, and then something new, something worse. The doorknob turned, slowly, gently, like someone testing it. Eric froze. The knob twisted again, then again. Short, controlled movements, someone carefully checking the lock without making noise. He grabbed his phone and dialed the motel's front desk. No answer. The knob stopped turning. Eric waited, barely breathing. His pulse thudded in his ears as he strained to hear anything. Then a whisper spoken so quietly, he almost thought he imagined it came from the other side of the door. "I know you're awake." Eric's blood ran cold. Every instinct told him to run, but he couldn't go anywhere, not with someone right outside. He backed away slowly, grabbing the only thing he could find as a weapon, a metal lamp. Minutes dragged by without sound. 5, 10, 15, nothing. Finally, Eric dared to look through the peephole again. And this time, he saw something. A man stood inches from the door, not the clerk. Someone else. Someone taller, with wild hair plastered to his forehead and eyes opened wide, unblinking, like he hadn't slept in days. His lips were curled in a twitching half-smile, one corner pulled up too high, and he wasn't looking at the door. He was looking directly into the peephole. Eric stumbled back, heart hammering. The man outside spoke softly, but clearly. "You shouldn't look at things there looking back." Eric's breath hitched. Suddenly, the man reached up and covered the peephole with his hand. Darkness filled the tiny glass circle. Eric didn't know what to do. He grabbed his phone again and dialed 911 with shaking hands. While he spoke to the dispatcher, explaining where he was and what was happening, he never took his eyes off the door. The dispatcher said they would send someone immediately. The motel was remote, but police were about 20 minutes away. 20 minutes of holding a lamp like a weapon. 20 minutes of waiting for footsteps. 20 minutes of listening for breathing outside the door. But there was nothing. When the police finally arrived, they found the hallway empty. The rain had stopped. The only evidence someone had been, there was a muddy footprint right in front of Eric's door, one single footprint facing inward. The officer knocked on the clerk's office door, but there was no answer. They opened the door and found the office empty, the hunting magazine still on the counter, the back door wide open. The clerk was never found. And the man Eric saw? Police found footprints in the mud outside the motel leading into the woods. They followed the tracks for nearly half a mile before losing them in a creek bed. Eric checked out immediately and drove the rest of the way to the hospital without stopping. He didn't care about fatigue anymore. He didn't care about sleep. He cared about getting away. But the worst part wasn't the tap on the door, or the whisper, or even the man staring through the peephole. It was the call Eric received 2 days later. One of the officers had reviewed the motel's old security cameras. They caught the man in the hallway, standing in front of room 7, still, unmoving, for 3 full hours, just watching the door, listening, waiting. And the last thing the footage showed before cutting off was the man tilting his head toward the camera, smiling that same too wide smile, and mouthing something the tech couldn't hear, but Eric could read lips. "I'll see you again." Welcome to Apex Stories Hub. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button, tap the like button, Press the bell icon to never miss an update, and leave a comment to tell us what you think. Your support motivates us to bring you even more interesting and exciting stories. Subscribe now and stay connected with Apex Stories Hub for daily amazing content. I've always believed that some encounters happen for a reason, either to warn us, to change us, or to show us that we know far less about the world than we think. But what happened to me 4 years ago still sits in the back of my mind, like a splinter I can remove. It didn't change my life. It didn't teach me anything inspiring. It just left me terrified of windows, silence, and the idea that someone can be a few inches away from you, and you won't even know it until they want you to. Back then, I lived in a small 2-bedroom rental house in a quiet town. My roommate, Chase, had moved out a month earlier, leaving me with the choice to find a new roommate or pay double rent. I chose the second option because, frankly, I enjoyed the quiet. The house wasn't big, but it had character. Wood floors that creaked in the kitchen, a long hallway that echoed footsteps, and a set of floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room that looked out into the backyard. During the day, it felt peaceful, bright, open. At night, those same windows became black mirrors. I could see myself, but I always felt like someone else might be looking too. The incident started on a Tuesday night around 11 p.m. I was in the living room, watching videos with the lights dimmed. Everything was calm until my phone buzzed with a notification from my cheap outdoor security camera, the one facing the backyard. Motion detected. I frowned. Probably a raccoon, maybe a stray cat. I opened the app casually, not expecting to see anything important, but the camera showed something I'd never seen before. A figure, a person, standing at the edge of the backyard, half in the shadows. Their posture was strange, rigid, like they were bracing against something. The angle made it hard to see a face. At first, I thought they were just passing by in the alley behind my property. But no, they were on the grass, facing my house, facing the window I was sitting near. The worst part? They weren't moving. Not swaying, not shifting, not turning their head. Just standing. I zoomed in on my phone, and the moment I did, the camera glitched. A white line cut across the footage. Then everything went black for a second before the image came back. Now the person was gone. I swallowed hard and glanced at the actual window behind me. Nothing, just darkness. My reflection staring back at me. "This is stupid," I muttered. It was probably just a tall shadow. Or maybe someone walking their dog, and the camera lagged. Still, I closed the curtains. But that wasn't the end. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps outside the window. Slow, dragging, like someone strolling back and forth inches from the glass. I muted my TV and held my breath. The footsteps stopped. Then came a new sound. A soft tapping, tap, 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 like a knuckle gently knocking on the glass. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the curtains, knowing that only a few thin threads of fabric separated me from whatever was out there. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, more direct. I forced myself to stand up, trying to stay silent. As I reached for the lamp to turn it off, the tapping immediately stopped. Like they heard me, I froze with my hand halfway to the switch. Tap, 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 tap. Rapid this time. Urgent. My chest tightened. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. I grabbed my phone and opened the security feed again. Camera offline. That had never happened. Not once. I backed into the highway and stood there, listening. Everything was silent again. No footsteps, no tapping, no wind. Finally, I called the police. I didn't care if they thought I was paranoid. 2 officers arrived about 15 minutes later. They checked the backyard, the alley, the fence line. Nothing. One officer told me it was probably an animal hitting the window or the house settling. I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But the next night proved it wasn't. Around 10:30 p.m., I checked the camera again, nervous out of habit, and there he was, the same figure, standing closer, now maybe 10 feet from the window. This time, he leaned forward slightly, his head tilted in a strange angle, like he was studying the house, studying me. I scrambled for my phone to call the police again, but before I could even hit the contact, a notification popped up. Camera connection restored. Video playback available. Playback? It never did that before. Against better judgment, I clicked it. The footage showed the figure walking toward the house, slowly, step by step. Then he stopped at the window, and what I saw next made my hands go numb. He pressed his face against the glass, his forehead, his nose, his mouth, like he was trying to look in, trying to see me. But the curtains had been closed. He stayed like that for a full minute, breathing fog onto the glass. Then, suddenly, his head snapped up as if he heard something, and he ran backward into the shadows, disappearing almost unnaturally fast. My entire body went cold. This wasn't someone passing by. This wasn't kids messing around. This man was watching me, waiting, studying, and he knew exactly where my windows were. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my hallway with a kitchen knife and all the lights on. Every creak made me jump. Every passing car headlight made me flinch, but nothing happened. The next morning, I checked the window where the figure had pressed his face. There were smudge marks, a forehead, a nose, a mouth, breath marks, clear as day. I called the police again, and this time they took it seriously. They dusted for prints, checked for footprints in the grass, and even canvassed the neighborhood. They didn't find anything useful, but I felt a shift, like the man wasn't done yet. On the third night, I installed brighter motion lights and double-checked all the locks. I even placed a chair against my bedroom door. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with another notification. Motion detected. Front door camera. My blood went ice cold. Front door? I opened the feed, praying it was a false alarm. It wasn't. A face filled the screen, pressed right up against the peephole camera. A distorted, wide-eyed face staring directly into the lens. I couldn't make out features, just stretched skin, a glint of an eye, and a mouth slightly open, like he was whispering something. And then he smiled. Not a normal smile, too wide, too deliberate, too slow. Then he raised one hand and dragged his fingers down the camera, producing a squealing scrape through my phone's audio. I almost threw up. I wanted to call the police, but I was afraid to make a sound. I was afraid even my breathing would alert him. The scraping continued for maybe 10 seconds before suddenly stopping. I waited, trembling, listening. Then came the softest sound I've ever heard. A whisper through the door. So faint, I thought I imagined it. Why did you close the curtains? My heart stopped. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I stayed frozen until the sun came up. When I finally got the courage to check the cameras again, the man was gone. The police found footprints on the porch, but nothing else. They suggested I stay with family or friends until I could install a full surveillance system. I didn't need convincing. Within 2 hours, I packed a bag and left. I never returned to that house. I never found out who he was. The police never updated me. But sometimes, at night, when I'm lying in my new apartment, I get the sudden feeling that someone is staring through the window. And I'm too afraid to check, because some close encounters don't end. Some people don't stop watching, and sometimes closing the curtains is exactly what makes them interested in you. It was nearly midnight when 13-year-old Evan finally shut off his video game console. His parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving him under the supervision of his older sister, Kayla, who, true to her college student nature, had fallen asleep on the couch hours earlier. Their house sat at the edge of a quiet wooded neighborhood, the kind where the streetlights flickered inconsistently and tall pine trees swayed like watchful silhouettes. Even with the heater running, the air inside felt colder than usual, as if the house itself was bracing for something. Evan shuffled into the kitchen to grab a drink before heading to bed. As he poured water into a glass, he caught a glimpse of movement in the backyard through the sliding glass door. It was subtle, like a brief shift of shadow, but enough to pull his eyes toward the darkness. He squinted, leaning closer. Their backyard opened into a small patch of woods. During the daytime, it was peaceful, but at night, it felt like a portal into something unknowable. At first, he saw nothing, just the outlines of trees, a dusting of frost on the grass, and the faint reflection of his own face in the glass. He let it go and turned toward the hall. Then tap. He froze mid-step. Tap, tap. This time, the sound was unmistakable. It came from the window. A slow, deliberate tapping, like someone pressing a fingernail against the glass to get his attention. Tap. Evan's heartbeat surged. He spun back toward the sliding door, expecting to see a fallen branch or maybe a raccoon. Instead, he saw a man standing just outside the window. The figure wasn't there a moment ago. He was sure of it. Yet now he stood still as a statue, facing the house. He wasn't pressed up close. Instead, he hovered just beyond the faint pool of light from the kitchen, his outline barely visible. But what stood out, what chilled Evan instantly, were the eyes' two small reflections catching the light enough to confirm that the man was staring directly at him. Evan staggered back, nearly dropping his glass. The man didn't move. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't tilt his head. He simply stood, watching. The house felt suddenly suffocating. Evan shouted for his sister. "Kyla!" No response. "Kayla, wake up!" His voice was shaking now, loud enough to echo through the house. Kayla jolted awake, groggy and confused. "What? What's your problem?" "There's someone outside," Evan whispered sharply, pointing toward the kitchen. Kayla frowned, but followed him back only for both of them to find the window completely empty. No man, no shadow, nothing. "Evan," she sighed, "it's probably just you scaring yourself. This house is creepy at night. Don't freak me out." "But I saw him," Evan insisted. "He was right there. He was looking at me." Kayla softened slightly, but still didn't buy it. "Look, it's late. Go to bed. I'll double-check the locks." She walked around securing the windows and sliding door while Evan lingered behind her, still trembling. Eventually, she turned off the lights and they both headed to their rooms. Evan lay awake for nearly an hour, listening to the wind scrape against the siding outside. He tried to convince himself that maybe he had imagined it, that the reflection or the shadows had played tricks on him. But the tapping, he knew what he heard. Just as he finally began to drift off, a new sound jolted him upright. Crunch, footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the leaves behind the house. Evan shot out of bed and ran to the window. He held his breath, peeking out from the side of the curtain. His room faced the backyard. The woods were still, the grass unmoving, no sign of anything. Then he saw it, a shape, standing in the same place as before, except now the man was closer, much closer. He stood almost directly in the center of the backyard, angled slightly toward Evan's window as though he had been looking somewhere else and had just turned his attention toward the boy. His clothes were dark, but not in the way of normal nighttime wear. They looked dirty, ragged, as if he had been walking through the woods for days. His posture was stiff, unnatural. Evan stepped backward, but the wooden floor creaked beneath his feet. The man reacted instantly. His head snapped upward, directly toward Evan's room. Evan dropped to the floor behind his bed, heart racing so violently he felt sick. He debated running to Kayla, but panic held him frozen. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, gathering every ounce of courage, Evan crawled toward his door. Just as his hand touched the doorknob tap, Evan stiffened. The sound didn't come from the backyard. It came from his window. He slowly turned, dread choking his breath. The curtains were still drawn, but now they bulged inward slightly, just enough to suggest someone was leaning against the glass from outside. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He couldn't. Tap, tap, tap it. The tapping became rhythmic, more forceful. Evan scrambled out of his room and sprinted to Kayla's door, flinging it open. Kayla. He's outside again. He's at my window. Please get up. Kayla bolted up, fear taking over now that she saw the terror in her brother's face. She grabbed her phone and marched with him back toward his room, ready to yell at whoever was out there. But again, when they looked, the window was normal. No tapping, no shadow, no man. Okay, Kyla said, voice shaking. We're calling the police just in case. As she dialed, they both heard something that froze them in place. The backyard gate latch. Click. It slowly, unmistakably opened. Kayla's face drained of color. She grabbed Evan's arm and dragged him downstairs. They barricaded themselves in the living room, away from the windows, and stayed huddled together while she remained on the phone with the dispatcher. 5 minutes felt like 50 before the police finally arrived. Officers checked the backyard, the gate, the woods, everything. They found footprints. Lots of them. A man's size, leading from the woods to multiple windows around the house, as if he had circled the property several times. But the strangest part was Evan's window. The officer called Kayla over. Ma'am, you said he was tapping? She nodded. He pointed at the glass. Evan and Kayla leaned close. There were fingerprints. Smudged, dirty prints covering the window. Not full palm prints, just fingertips. And they weren't placed randomly. They were lined up perfectly, in rows, as if someone had dragged all 10 fingers slowly down the glass. The officer looked deeply unsettled. We've had reports of a vagrant wandering these woods the past few nights. Tall guy, long dark hair, dirty clothing. Doesn't talk to anyone. Doesn't respond when approached. Just watches. You were lucky you called. This could have gone very differently. Evan felt a chill crawl up his spine. The police searched the woods for over an hour, but found no trace of the man. For weeks afterward, Evan refused to sleep near a window and insisted on keeping the curtains permanently closed. Kayla slept in his room, too terrified to admit she was just as shaken as he was. And though the man was never seen again, sometimes, late at night, Evan swears he hears the same sound outside his window, soft, deliberate tapping. As these stories settle in your mind, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear. Close encounters aren't just tales whispered by thrill seekers or written in old journals. They real moments lived by real people who came face to face with something or someone they were never meant to meet. Whether it was a stranger watching from the tree line, footsteps approaching in the dark, or a presence that knew their name before they ever spoke it, each encounter left a mark that time could never fully erase. What makes these stories truly frightening isn't just the danger, it's the uncertainty. How many times have we walked alone, thinking no one was around? How many nights have we heard a sound and convinced ourselves it was nothing? And how many close encounters happen every day unnoticed, unreported, unresolved? For every story told, there are 100 more people who stayed quiet, either because they were too afraid to relive it, or too afraid no one would believe them. If tonight's stories made you rethink the dark corners of your home, the silence outside your window, or the feeling of being watched when you swear you're alone, you're not the only one. Encounters like these remind us that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just waits, patiently, for the moment you're least prepared. Thank you for watching Apex Stories Hub, where true horror has a voice. If any part of these encounters sent chills down your spine, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. I share real, terrifying experiences every week. Stories sent by viewers, stories buried in old reports, and stories that most people will never know even happened. And if you have ever had your own close encounter, something you can't explain, something that still follows you in your dreams, you can share it in the comments or send it privately. Your story might be featured in a future video, and you might help someone else realize they were not alone in what they went through. Until next time, stay alert, stay aware, and remember, sometimes the scariest encounters happen when you think you're safe, and sometimes the thing you're trying to avoid is already closer than you think. Stay safe out there. Good night.